Hi, State Representative Travis Couture here, giving you a video update just to talk about what's going on in the legislature up to this point. Some good things happened. I passed my first House Bill 1274, regarding child abuse and malnutrition out of the House, and just this morning I went and did a Senate hearing on that bill, so it's in the Senate right now and it's scheduled for executive session next week. So it's heading on its way throughout the system, with flying colors going through the system. And what that would do, that bill, it would create a child malnutrition field guide for Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And unfortunately, that might seem like, why do we need that? And unfortunately, there's kids in our state who die tragically of malnutrition and child abuse while under the care of Department of Children, Youth, and Families. There was a young man, R-Allyn Franks. He was 15 years old and severely autistic, and he and his siblings lived with his adoptive parents, and they were abused for well over 3 years. DCYF investigated this starting in 2017 when when neighbors and teachers kind of rose the red flags about this kind of child abuse, and they found that they were being locked in their rooms, they were being beaten, the food was being locked away in a garage, and food was being used as a weapon. And unfortunately, an autistic child like R-Allyn Franks, doesn't have the type of voice to be able to kind of stand up for himself. And well, tragically, in 2020, he died. And this was a week after seeing CPS agents from our state, where the CPS agents told the adoptive parents that they should stop beating their kids. Tragically, he was 15 years old and he weighed only 70 pounds at his death, and that was the cause of his death. And the Child Fatality Review Board decided that as a potential solution to this problem, that social workers and CPS agents in our state did not adequately have training or know what child malnutrition looks like. And so that was used as an excuse why they didn't do anything about young R-Allyn Franks. And it resulted in his death. And it's unacceptable that we should have a 3-year investigation while a child starves to death in our state. So I hope that this bill will help save kids in the future. So it's good that that bill's passing through the House, but under unfortunate circumstances. Next, I want to update you on what's going on in Olympia surrounding public safety and crime and punishment. One good thing that's happened is that at the beginning of the session, we learned that the state was going to move sexually violent predators from McNeil Island, who are essentially the most violent sex predators in our entire state. They're civilly committed to McNeil Island, and the state wanted to move them into unsecure housing in our residential communities in the 35th District. And I'm proud to say that we had a big media onslaught and a lot of work and effort, and we introduced 3 different bills that ultimately didn't pass, but we did get the private contractor that was providing that housing to move out of the 35th District and to put that house on the market as of the other day. So that's good news. We stopped our communities from being under threat of these very violent, sexually violent predators. And it's important because these state agencies and everyone here in Olympia, they work for you, and their primary duty should be to make sure that you have adequate public safety. And putting dangerous people in your neighborhoods is not public safety. So happy to report that we got that done, but some other bad things happened as well. Right now in Olympia, there is a big movement, in my opinion, to prioritize criminals over innocent people and people who victimize society over the victims of crimes. We have passed bills, which my party was against and me as well, to fast track getting criminals out of prison, to reduce sentence enhancements where people may use children to sell drugs or do shootings near school zones in certain areas like bus stops and playgrounds. Those sentence enhancements, which would put those people in jail for longer, were eliminated. We also eliminated illegal financial obligations, or you might know them as victims' crime compensation. That compensation helps compensate victims, but it also helps fund our DNA testing for crimes as well. And those are very soft on crime legislation that should not have passed. And unfortunately, we tried to bring to the House floor a bill to fix the police pursuit situation. And every Republican voted to fix it, and every Democrat voted to not bring it up to the floor because they did not like the procedure in which we brought it up to the floor. Now, fortunately, the Senate did get to have that debate. However, the Senate bill regarding the police pursuit fix was gutted. Although we did not have a fix to the Blake decision for hard drugs in our communities in the House, we did have a few little good things like banning pill presses that can make 3,000 pills per hour of fentanyl that make it look like something else like Percocet. The Senate did pass another bill about recriminalizing some of these hard drugs. But let's be clear, neither the police pursuit fix in the Senate or the recriminalization of hard drugs in the Senate go far enough. And it's not good enough to keep our public safe. This comes at a time where we passed 2 pieces of gun legislation off of the House floor. Anti-gun legislation that would tear apart your constitutional rights, such as a ban on semi-automatic weapons or, quote, assault weapons. Laws like this have been proven that they do not stop violent gun crime. And as a matter of fact, less than 1% of gun crimes are committed with these kinds of weapons. But they do tear apart at law-abiding gun owners' rights to defend themselves and to keep and bear arms. And it goes against our state constitutional rights as well. And they enacted an emergency clause to where you don't have the democratic process of referendum anymore, so you don't get your say at the ballot box if it passes with the governor's signature with an emergency clause intact. That's one bad bill that I vehemently oppose on the floor, and you could go look on my website to see the House floor speeches on that topic. There was another bill about guns that would make you take a test and then be entered into a registry to be able to transfer, buy a firearm. And I personally do not believe that any constitutional rights should be subject to a test. We don't ask people to take a test to vote, for example, for a specific reason. And we don't ask them to enter into a database either. Coming through the Senate is another bad gun bill that's now coming to the House about punishing manufacturers of firearms for crimes that may have been committed in the community. Now, those are crimes that the legislature has now said we are going to reduce sentences for with the sentencing enhancement bill we talked about earlier. And we're not going to have to pay victims compensation for, like the bill we talked about earlier. And one last thing I want to talk about is education. Now, I stood up on the House floor to finally fully fund special education. In this state, basic education is a constitutional right and should be fully funded. That's in our state constitution. But right now, special education is subject to a multiplier and a cap on how many kids can be in special education that sometimes cuts special ed kids who really need services in the K-12 system out. That was something I stood up on the House floor and said was absolutely wrong, that we should fully fund special education and that we should lift the cap. And unfortunately, a striking amendment sponsored by my colleague, Representative Stokesbury, was not taken to fully fund special education and lift the cap, and to also value parents' participation in the special ed process and to help them out for parents with special ed kids who have a hard time already navigating the system. That striking amendment was voted down on the House floor by the majority party. And what's unfortunate is we did get a bill that did get a little bit more funding to special ed to the tune of about $350 million. And there was a bill not just too long before that would have gave almost that same amount of money to pay inmates in our prisons a minimum wage. And so when we value special education as much as we value paying inmates, that's wrong. And we got to do a lot better in special ed. We are in the bottom 5th of all of the 50 states, and we have to do a lot better because these are our most vulnerable kids, and they too can learn, and they too should deserve a life and an education. Well, I thank you for tuning in today, and hopefully I could see you again in another couple weeks and do another video. Thanks.